Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Sasaibi Kimis, and we are here on the live webinar for unlocking the potential of refugee women. I just want to thank WFTO for giving us this forum to have this discussion. And today I'll be moderating a discussion with Heidi Chris and Izabela Erşahin. So I founded Earth Air as a social enterprise in 2013, and you're actually seeing some photos of refugee artisans that we work with in Malaysia, and we have been creating a range of jewelry for Made 51 over the last couple of years. And Heidi was the first person that we met from Made 51, and it's been an amazing journey for us at Earth Air as well. So quickly, I just wanted to introduce Heidi. Heidi Chris is the global lead at Made 51 for the United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR. She works as part of the livelihoods unit for UNHCR. She initiated Made 51 in 2018 as a way for refugees to earn income through craft. And Heidi has worked at the unique intersection of refugee issues and handmade sector throughout her career. In fact, I was actually very happy to learn that Heidi was also the founder of Women Craft. She really understands the challenges that social enterprises go through as well. And the next speaker we will have is Izabela Erşahin. She's actually the founder and designer of Bebemoss.com. It's a line of organic handmade toys. Women knit them. She's also the founder of Sector 7, which is a social impact-driven enterprise based in Istanbul, Turkey, which provides fair and flexible working opportunities to mothers in need. And the company currently works with over 120 women, both local and refugees. So the video that was shown, sort of illustrates what Made 51 is. So I'm actually going to start with Heidi here. And so Heidi, why was Made 51 founded? Could you share with us about your journey and how you came about actually founding this whole movement and initiative?
Thanks, Sassy. It's great to be here today. Actually, I'd like to start with a bit of a context on the refugee crisis, because I think that's something that probably not everyone is deeply familiar with. Right now in the world, there's 26.4 million refugees, of which half are children. And this doesn't even count the 1+ million refugees who are fleeing today from the Ukraine, just as we speak. And I think what we know is that the life of a refugee is a very difficult one. When someone becomes a refugee, they're likely to be displaced for many years, and their life is somehow in limbo. In protracted refugee situations, which are refugee situations that last 4 or 5 years or longer, refugees are likely to live in refugee camps or in urban settings for close to 2 decades. So you have whole generations that are growing up in refugee camps. And this, coupled with the fact that 86% of refugees are living in developing countries, means that it's quite a difficult situation and one of the most challenging crises of our time. So the reason we started Made 51 is because UNHCR believes that dignified work for the forcibly displaced is one of the most crucial ways that refugees can rebuild their lives and build dignified lives. Now the question is really around the artisan sector. Why was that a sector that we chose to specialize in? First, it's a growing sector of the economy. So it's forecasted to grow at a rate of 12% per year. And it doesn't require much investment to get started with crafts. So you don't need heavy machinery. All you need really are hands and raw materials to start the craft. And this makes the sector quite accessible for refugees. And we know that when refugees are forced to flee, that they take very little with them, but they take their hands and their skills and their heritage. And this is something that can be built on once they get into a refugee camp or in an urban setting. And, we know that they have the capacity to build something quite beautiful and something that would tell the story of their culture and also the story of their flight and their time as a refugee. So what we did was created a collaborative model in Made 51, recognizing that UNHCR wanted to do its part, but it really wanted to facilitate the model. And at the heart of the model are, of course, the refugee artisans, but also our social enterprise partners. And these are local crafts-based businesses that are experienced businesses working with host country producers. And through Made 51, we've engaged with them to work with refugee artisans. And they work together with refugee artisans on a daily basis. And together they develop a unique product line for Made 51. And that product line is sold through the social enterprises channels, but then it also comes together under the Made 51 brand, which is a collective now of 30 social enterprises in 23 countries around the world. So that's a bit about how we started Made 51. I think it's both about the income for the refugee artisan, but also helping to grow and support local social enterprises who are working in these developing countries by looking at it in a kind of a win-win situation for them. And it's also around helping to preserve the heritage and the culture of countries that are in conflict, such as the countries where refugees flee from.
Thanks, Heidi. Actually, when you were speaking, and before we get Izabela, I wanted to just quickly ask you, I mean, from UNHCR's perspective, because, I mean, we've always viewed the UN Refugee Agency as championing refugee causes, and it's always been as an emergency humanitarian crisis kind of agency. So now Made 51 is a complete change from that. Were there challenges for you, I mean, when you were trying to build this up as well, within Made 51, I mean, within UNHCR, and also when you're speaking to partners and things like that?
Yes, I mean, I think it is quite an innovative model for an international organization, and I think we may be the only international organization that actually has a brand attached to it that's trademarked a brand. I think for UNHCR, it was just this unique opportunity to look at how we can use UNHCR's really deep field structure. UNHCR has over 500 offices in, I think, like 130 countries around the world. So we know refugees really well, and we know their skills, and we need them to be able to use those skills to become self-reliant. So it was a way to build on that, but at the same time, to look at how it could facilitate the engagement of other partners in support of refugees. So in 2018, the Global Compact on Refugees was signed, which basically meant that we wanted the world to come together in support of refugees, and that's the private sector, small companies, everyone that can work together and support refugees. And the Made 51 model, in a way, is a great example of that, because we're looking at ways that people can engage across. As a social enterprise, you can engage locally, as Heir and Bebemoss do, with refugee artisans. As a retailer, you can place those orders for those products. As a consumer, you can buy those products and directly support a refugee. So it's a way that we can create a model that can impact refugees in a very positive way, and everyone can see the results of their action.
I think social enterprises definitely are great partners on the ground, since our mission is to be mission-led. So now I actually want to hear from Izabela. Izabela, could you actually share with us, as a social enterprise partner working with Made 51, how has your experience been, and what have been the benefits or challenges? How have you developed your process in working with refugees?
Hi, thank you for having me. Well, it's been a long journey, because I have been a social entrepreneur for over 9 years. So as you said it very well, we are based in Istanbul, Turkey, and we work with both local and refugee mothers. I wish I was one of those people who plans for this and so on. It just kind of happened. So I created this company and I started employing mothers in need. And when the Syrian crisis started, those refugees started coming and fleeing in. And as you may know, most of the refugees are not in camp situations, especially here in Turkey. So they will be living in those impoverished neighborhoods right next to their host community. So it kind of came along, and it was quite easy and normal for us to integrate the refugee mothers in our system. And when I first heard of Made 51 through social media, I believe, I started emailing them saying, we are one of those companies. We need support. We need some help of how to deal with those refugees and help us to bring our voices, a little bit further than what we are able to do by ourselves. So I was very grateful that Made 51 welcomed our company as one of the social enterprises among this system. What you have to know is that social enterprises are all for impact businesses, but we are businesses, so we have all the regular challenges of any regular business you can see out there, plus a few more. So it's even more difficult, being part of a system like Made 51, where we have 30 social enterprises from all over the world, whom are sharing the same values, who are fighting the same fight, not only to survive in a harsh environment as an enterprise or as a social enterprise, but also to survive as a social enterprise, mission-led, whom the priorities are to actually help those people. Having a group of people sharing knowledge, experience, having that sometimes WhatsApp group to whine and to support one another and so on, has been an amazing part of this journey. I believe we are actually more than just a group of social enterprises. We are what I would like to call a community of practice, where we really are learning from one another. We share the same concerns, the same passion for social entrepreneurship, and we are building something quite new together in this model. So this is my take on what being part of this thing is. I want to add as well that because Made 51 is a brand and those products are highly curated and has all the products have a beautiful aesthetic and so on. This is also extremely helpful for all small enterprises to get that support of people who will know the global market better, will have a little bit more resources to give us access to that information, which would make us more successful at the end of the day.
Thank you. I mean, I'm just going to echo in with some of my experiences as well. I mean, I first met Heidi in 2017, I think. Heidi came to Malaysia, and at that point, at Earth Air, we were working with some refugees, but rather informally. And we didn't actually have like a refugee product line. And Heidi said, hey, we want to, start this initiative called Made 51, and we want you to create a special product line made just by refugees. And in Malaysia as well, the refugees are not in camps, so they live in urban settings. And and in Malaysia we have refugees from Myanmar and all over the Middle East. So Afghani refugees, Syrian, Palestinian, Pakistani, and Rohingya refugees. So it was actually a challenge for us. I remember at that point trying to figure out how do we create a product that all of them could work on. And it took us some time, I think like almost a year, trying to figure out the heritage of the different women and trying to figure out what they could all work on. And then, of course, working with the Made 51 team and understanding, like what you said, like it's actually highly curated. So it's very high quality. And I think what I liked about the Made 51 initiative is that it's not charity focused. It's very much about, here are beautiful products, very like high quality, well-made products, but made by some of the most marginalized women and artisans around the world. So I felt like that was a very powerful model. And for Earth Air, we have grown so much in the last few years just from working with the Made 51 team, being able to be in Geneva and sell products and meet people from around the world. I mean, for us as well as an organization, it's been a huge growth for us. So I think any LSE to be part of the program is a huge, huge opportunity. I mean, in line with that, I actually wanted to go to our next topic is how is working with refugee women different from working with local artisans? And how does UNHCR, I mean, Made 51, and the local social enterprise, how do they overcome these challenges? Heidi, perhaps you could start.
Yeah, sure. And great to hear that, Sassy, that you feel Earth Air has grown through Made 51. Yeah, it is quite different in working with refugee artisans than for host country artisans. And I think there's a couple reasons. Of course, it differs a lot in whether it's a camp-based population or an urban population. But in either case, women have fled trauma, they've relocated themselves, they don't have a support structure in place, they don't have a livelihood, and they can be still experiencing some of that trauma. I think it's 52% of countries that have the right to work for refugees, which means that in all other countries, refugees do not have a legal right to work. The great thing about the artisan sector is that because it's an informal sector, it doesn't have the same kinds of regulations, and it's often one of the only sectors that's open for refugee women. I think the other great things about the artisan sector is that you also have, you just use your hands and your materials, so it's easy to start and try and see what's possible there. As well, I think it's, women can work together in groups, and when they work together in groups, then they can create this support structure that they've really been missing. And I think we see that both in Earth Air and Bebemoss are great examples of that they learn how to support each other while they're doing their craft. They're talking about solutions and children's education and how they can make their way in the new country. So I think you have, the reason why it's different is because you have a different population to start that has just a lot of baggage that they've been carrying with them because of their flight as refugees. And then they have these constraints, legal constraints and physical constraints, which limit their movement in some cases, their ability to work in other cases. And so, they're just in a more vulnerable, more marginalized position to start with. And I guess how we overcome that in Made 51 is really, I think the key is the social enterprise model, because if you were to partner them with regular businesses, you would worry really about the work environment that they work in. But through the Made 51 model, with the social enterprises who are working according to fair trade standards and UNHCR protection principles, then we're able to ensure that the work environment that the women are in is meeting those fair trade conditions. It's a good work environment that isn't putting them at risk. It's a safe work environment, and they're being rewarded for that. They're getting a local living wage, a dignified wage, and doesn't put them in harm's way.
Izabela, could you share some thoughts as well? Oh, you're muted, Izabela.
Okay, I'm back in. So I totally agree. I think the fact that those women are refugees, it is very hard for them to work in any formal work settings. There is the language barriers, there's the cultural barriers. I mean, for us, what I was able to observe is also that, you know, because of the religious and cultural barriers and peer pressure mostly, it is very hard for those women to go and work outside of their home, you know, go in the morning and come back in the evening. So we have to find models and ways to make that a lot more flexible. This is exactly what we are doing at Bebemoss. You know, it is a flexible model where the women can not only decide how much they want to work, how many hours they want to work or they can work, because they have to take care of their children, they have to take care of their elderly, they have to take care of their household. So this is a dialogue we're having with them. And also they have the choice to either come to our workshop and work with us, and they can even bring their children. We have a special area for the children to be safe and play while their mothers are working, or to take some of the work home, because, you know, this is crafts we're talking about. Those are small things mostly we're talking about. So it is possible for them to, you know, take the materials they need and just go and finish their work in their home whenever they are available, and they have some time to do that. So that layer of a social enterprise who is able to, one, adapt to those difficult conditions, to understand and have a empathetic response is absolutely necessary. And then we can sell those products to bigger companies and bigger sourcing places and so on. That social enterprise layer, and we saw that among every single one of the social enterprises part of the Made 51 network, is a key element to you know, to kind of plug and play those two components so that they can work together in a global market, actually.
Yeah. So, refugees, do they have formal right to work in Turkey?
They do. They do. We are one of the lucky countries. They have access to a lot of things as Turkish citizens do. So they do have the right to work, but there's a lot of different rules. You have to ask for work permits. There is no part-time possible. It has to be formal employment. So those women are automatically left out of that working group. As well as are the Turkish women, you know, as long as they become mothers, childcare is an issue, cultural barriers, peer pressure are an issue. And that's why we actually have both, because they have the exact same set of problems to deal with. Refugees on top, you know, some language barriers and you know, their traumatic past due to their displacement. But our artisan women and artisan mothers share the exact same problems and difficulties to join the formal workforce.
Yeah, I mean, contrast that with Malaysia. The refugees in Malaysia don't have the formal right to work. So that is a challenge for us. But I mean, say in the same way, you know, because artisan sector is more informal, it has been easier for us to engage with the women. And I think for us, one of the challenges was also that, you know, because a lot of the refugees in Malaysia, because Malaysia has not signed on to the 1953 protocol, refugees in Malaysia, you know, they don't have any legal rights. So normally they are Malaysia is a transitory place where they come and they stay for 5 to 10 years and then they get resettled. So we've had a couple of refugees that we've trained and then get resettled. So that's one of the challenges. So we have to keep training and making sure that, you know, lots of artisans have the skills to make the products that we're making for Made 51, to make sure that the product quality and the range continues. So the next question I wanted to just kind of touch on was about, you know, International Women's Day. The key buzzword has been about sustainability. Can you share, Izabela, a little bit more about how the work that you're doing is contributing to sustainability and what you think needs to be improved.
Well, you know, most of the social enterprises from the Made 51 network are sustainable companies. We are mission-led. So there are two major points in that mission. One is the people, and the second one coming right after is the planet. We care for the people and we care for the planet. So those two focuses are, you know, part of our everyday. You know, we are sourcing raw materials in a sustainable and ethical way. So trying to work with eco-friendly materials, recycled materials, and so on. And don't forget as well that, you know, those artisans are trying to, you know, make products out of what they find. So it is a lot of recycled materials, of waste usage, and so on. So this is a very important part. And because this is artisanal and therefore handwork we're talking about, you know, it is a very you know, little carbon footprint producing activity. There's rarely machinery involved. You know, it's locally sourced, available raw materials. We found next to us. It's not stuff we bring from other end of the planet, etc., etc., etc. And that's why all those businesses, and especially those part of Made 51, are extremely sustainable businesses and extremely oriented on the protection of the environment and the planet, usage of waste, recycling, etc., etc.
Heidi, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think Izabela said it all. Maybe just to add that I think it's also natural materials that the social enterprises are prioritizing with the refugee artisans in addition to the waste materials. So we have a lot of natural grasses that are being used. In Armenia, they've reintroduced felting, hand felting from the sheep's wool, which has been a great change from, you know, industrial felt that they were using before. So really looking at how to use natural materials that, you know, and the production of those natural materials also creates a supply chain in and of itself, because you have to have someone who's processing those natural materials, like shearing the sheep to get the wool to start the felting. So that's also, it's a bit of a slower production, I would say, in the artisanal sector because of that. But it means that you can incorporate both natural and waste materials as well. And then I guess I would add that so we have the Made 51 online shop, which is run by our commercial partner for Made 51. And there we're doing all we can to look at, you know, how the packaging can also be refugee made from waste materials, and you know, the products, whenever possible, can be shipped by sea or by a reduced shipping method. So looking just wherever we can and how to reduce the carbon footprint, but yeah, also knowing that it all starts with the product.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely attest to that from Earth Air's perspective as well. I mean, the Made 51 team is always asking us, how much of your product is natural, and, you know, are you using so we've been using recycled carpets in some of our products, and then the other thing is actually making sure that every Made 51 product has an artisanal heritage cultural element, that it's not just like, say, something sewn. You know, it has to reflect something that is handmade. And I think that has been a vein that we have seen from our end about the products that are made under Made 51. So I think that definitely keeps to the theme of sustainability and reducing the carbon footprint. So we know that, you know, obviously we're talking about empowerment of refugee women, and that economic independence is critical for women's empowerment. So how do you feel, and how have you seen this happen in what you're doing? Perhaps, Heidi, you could start. Oh, sorry, Heidi. You
Right.
wanted
Just to pick up on what you last mentioned, Sassy, around the design criteria and making sure that the product has that heritage skill. That's an important part of Made 51 for several reasons. We want, of course, to have these elevated products that really show off the craftsmanship of refugees and show that they're people that have talents and skills, and they can be positive contributors to society. So it's a bit like an example of how a refugee can contribute to society in a way is how we see it. But then also towards social cohesion. So we really need to make sure that there's a story behind that product, and that story is unique to refugees, so that we're not taking jobs away from host country producers, so that the refugees are adding skills to that social enterprise and to the economy overall, because they're bringing this unique skill set that the host community doesn't have, which brings around a return on investment for both the social enterprise and the local economy. Now I forgot the last question that you asked.
Well, actually, I wanted to add to what you just said, because I think that's a very important point. What you said about how refugees are Made 51 is a vehicle to help refugees be viewed as economic contributors to the host nations. And that's a very, very important point. Because we saw, at Heir during the COVID pandemic, when there was a lot of xenophobia in Malaysia, people were saying, oh, immigrants and refugees should get out of the country. They should be pushed out because they're the ones supposedly infecting people. And we were working with refugees at that point to make PPE to help Malaysians. So we actually got media to cover the fact that here are refugees, the people that Malaysians are insulting, helping to save Malaysian lives. That refugees are not here to just get a free ride out of the host nation. They're here to work hard, and they just want the dignity and opportunity of work. That's essentially what they want. Okay, so I'm just going to repeat the last question about economic independence. How do we see economic independence, through Made 51, and how have you seen it happen? Could you give us some examples or illustrations of this?
Yeah, I think, what I can speak most to is probably in Tanzania, and just the development that women have by being a part of a Made 51 social enterprise. And I think that's really, because the artisan sector is this open sector, you can attract women who don't necessarily need literacy skills. They may not have had formal education. They may otherwise have been confined to their homes or not really have the opportunity to interact very much. And I think that's only exemplified with refugees. And then, when they're then able to be part of a group and able to be part of a network that's working together, that's looking for solutions, that's earning money, then you have a whole different level of development that they're able to achieve. And that's, the ability to then have their own money and make their own decisions about how that money is used. And I think we all see that, the majority of refugee women use the money to support their children and their children's education. And, besides that, investing in the family and looking for opportunities. So in addition to that, you also have their children who see them now as role models, someone who their mother has in some ways risen very far in her life and is now perhaps a leader in an artisan group. She has her own decision-making powers, and that standing within the family is passed on to the children, who then can look at life a bit differently than their mother had at the beginning. So I guess that would be my answer.
Izabela?
Yeah, people do not often realize that being a refugee is sometimes a lifetime. People are fleeing a conflict as they want to and staying refugees for 10, 15, or even more years. So, we think that they can put their life in limbo, then the conflict is ending, and then they're going back. We wish it was so, but it's not. Those are extremely long periods of time. So it is impossible just to put on hold their life and their development. Their children won't wait to grow up. They will, they need also opportunity, etc., etc. So the fact that we are working with Artisan, and I must say that mostly the artisan women we're working with are only women, so it's 100% women enterprise on our side. But if we look at globally, and I know that from all the conversation we had with all the other social enterprises, most of the artisan are women in those social enterprises. So giving them sustainable living wage, income, will allow them to build strength, to build independence, etc., etc. Those women are growing to be the leaders of their families, of their communities, and it is very important. It is one of those things which make me personally jump out of my bed, no matter how tired I am, and run to work, because this is an amazing feeling that you see all those women empowered. And you know what? We did a survey a few months ago, and we asked all our artisan women, what are you doing with the money you are making? And believe it or not, most of the responses were the women are spending that money for a better future for their children. So it's better nutrition, is things that the kids will need at school. It's extra healthcare if needed, and then it extends to extracurricular activities and so on and so on. So when we empower a community of women, we are creating and we are empowering actually the new generation of those children. And as you said, Sasi, so well, having the little girls looking at their moms making a good living, and having their word to say about what are they going to do with that money and how are they going to spend that money, and being real contributors to the family budget is extremely empowering. And they start dreaming bigger, and we can see that year after year, because we have those kids actually basically growing in our workshop. We can see year after year, from the scared little girl who was scared of people, was scared of us because we're foreigners, and so on, now to a little girl who goes to school and who says, I'm going to be a doctor, or I'm going to build a company like my mom does. It's something extremely, extremely powerful, and this is really what drives me as an entrepreneur. This is what is giving me so much purpose in this entrepreneurship journey.
Yeah, I mean, I have found similarly at Earth Air, working with refugee women in Malaysia is, working with Malaysian artisans is a very different experience than working with refugee artisans. And not to say that Malaysian artisans are not as hardworking, but I do find that the refugee artisans we work with are so committed, so hardworking, and almost really hungry for opportunity, really hungry for work. So we have really enjoyed working with refugee women, because we know that when we have an order, and we work on the design and the production. Yes, it's not always easy, managing timelines and deadlines, but that's the same with working with local artisans as well. But refugee artisans are, they're so committed. They're very focused. That's how I would say it. They're very focused, and it's been fantastic for us to work with them. And like what both of you said, we have seen how Made 51 and being part of Made 51 has made a huge impact in the lives of the refugee artisans that we're working with in Malaysia. We recently had one refugee artisan woman. Her husband passed away in a tragic work accident, and because we had been working with her for about a few years, so we stepped in to help her with a lot of the medical issues, and the whole community of women have been supporting her, helping her with taking care of her children, because she's now the head of a family, the head of her whole family. She's supporting 4 adults and 2 children. So the this is real. I mean, Made 51 is really changing lives, because there are real people behind these products that are being impacted, and their lives being changed by the opportunities that they have. So we're getting towards the end of the session, and we have another 15 minutes. We're going to move on to some questions. So anybody who's watching now on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram, please ask more questions so that we can answer them while we're still here. So one of the questions that has come through is, Heidi, this is probably a not thorny, but we often get asked this question, so I'm going to ask this. So people always ask, oh, this product is say $30 US, and the question always is, how much does the artisan make? How is this really helping the refugees that are making this product?
Thanks, Sasi. Yeah, I think this is a question we get asked a lot. In the Made 51 model, it's really around inclusion, and that's both UNHCR's and Made 51's goal is including the refugee artisans in the societies and the economies in which they're working. And towards inclusion, it's making sure that the refugee artisan is able to earn a fair wage according to fair trade and protection principles. So we want to go through the local living wage scale to make sure that the artisan payment is in line with a local living wage, but also in line with host community artisans. So again, we don't want to create any tension between refugee artisans and host community artisans by paying refugee artisans much more than an artisan, a host community artisan who's earning wage according to a local living wage. A local living wage is really determined. It's a WFTO principle to look at the cost of living in a particular location and what it takes for a woman to cover her basic needs and to have some additional income that she can save. So it's a principle that's applied throughout the world in every country through WFTO. And how that's determined is really by doing a time motion study. So looking at how long it takes to make a product and then calculating the living wage from there. So it's a process that we go through to make sure that each artisan receives a local living wage for the work that she does. We cannot determine the final price in some ways for products because there's, by being part of a value chain, you have many, many costs that are added to that value chain to get the product to market. We've seen this year that the shipping costs have just exponentially exploded 10 times. So of course, that shipping cost has to be built into the product. We want the social enterprises to be able to cover their operational costs and to have a profit margin because we want their work with refugee artisans to be sustainable and to make business sense for them. We also need the retailer to be able to make a margin because they may have the products in their stores once for charity, but the only way that they're going to continue to reorder it is if they're able to make a margin and it makes business sense for them. So Made 51 is really about including refugees in a value chain in a way that meets fair trade and protection principles. And we do our part to make sure that the artisan wage of that is fair and sustainable, but we don't control the final wage that the retailer would, the final product cost that the retailer would have.
Yeah, I want to step in on that point because this is a question I got a lot. So why don't you give all the money you make to the refugee artisans? I wish we could, but there's two different things we have to consider. One is that those women, they don't want charity. They want dignity, and they want to be paid fairly, of course, for their hard work. So this is one thing. The second layer is that we are businesses. We have cost, we have rent, we have taxes, it's just impossible to give everything to the refugee women and or to all the artisans. And as Heidi said it very well, there is we are respecting those fair trade principles by WFTO, and there is a very complicated way to calculate what is actually a fair payment depending on where the local social enterprise is, and so on. So we are respecting those principles, making sure, and just to tell you, usually, and this is the case for us, it is above the minimum local wage imposed by the government of Turkey. So it's not like we're exploiting those artisans. We are empowering them, and we're doing as much as we can. And you have to also think as a social enterprise where amazing inclusion is happening. There's magic happening when you create a space, when you bring together local artisans and refugee artisans, and you put them together around the table, and you make them work, for the same fair pay in the same great conditions. There's a magic happening. I see it every day. We have the Syrian moms and the Turkish moms coming, and at the beginning they would stay away from one another, and then they would get closer, and then they will look at what the neighbor one did, and how fast she is, how good she is, etc., etc. And the kids would play together, and then you have magic happening. This is how people get to know one another. This is how people get to understand one another. This is how people get to accept their cultural, political, etc., etc. differences they might have. It's an amazing environment for women to interact, first of all, and second of all, to get that dignity back. They don't want charity. I mean, charity, I always say that, I am against charity, and then people go, oh, how can she say that? She's a fair trade enterprise working with refugee women. I am against charity. I believe personally that charity is absolutely necessary in a time of a crisis. If somebody is hungry, we have to feed them. If somebody is cold, we have to, give them shelter, etc., etc. But as a long-term solution to elevate people out of poverty, charity is not the way to go. Employment, sustainable employment, and opportunity is the way to go. And this is exactly what social enterprises are doing all over the world to create opportunity for the refugees.
Absolutely. I mean, I wanted to just add, because we get asked the same question at Earth Air, and I think what both of you have said very well. It's the fact that we are actually being able to create economic independence for the artisans, and how important it is that refugees as well want to feel the way we feel. Why do all of us work? Because we want to earn an income, to have free agency, to be able to spend the money in whatever way we want. So that's the same dignity that refugees also want. And I often tell people that buy from us that it's not about how much goes back to the artisan, but it's very much about the fact that, as what Heidi said earlier, like, for example, at Earth Air, we're paying almost 50% more than the minimum wage in Malaysia per hour. So, that's a fair living wage for the artisans. And on top of that, the product price is made up of obviously material, labor, Then there is sales and marketing costs, there's logistics, there's shipping, there's design costs. And then, when we have the products placed at retailers, there's a retail commission that we need to pay. So all of these elements feed into the price. So it's not like a fixed percentage, and it's not, in the end, it's about what is the artisan getting, making sure that per hour or per product, they're getting a fair wage. And that is what I think all the social enterprises look at, to make sure that the artisans are treated fairly and earning a fair wage. The next, and the other thing I wanted to add is, like you said, Izabela, is that we're talking about a sustainable model here. Like you said, we're trying to move away from the charity model where we depend on donations to keep supporting the people that we work with. So to create a sustainable model, the social enterprise itself has to be sustainable. And the only way we can be sustainable is we have overheads, we have to pay rent, we have to pay salaries. There are people behind all of these social enterprises that are making these products happen. So it's only fair that those people who are making this happen also need to earn a fair living wage. We can't pay the artisans a fair living wage and expect the social enterprise to do everything for free. So that's what it is. It's that, in the end, this is a sustainable model. It's a business in the end, trying to create good and doing it continuously. Right. Okay. So one last question before we sort of we want to end. We're going to show possibly a video at the end. But before we get there, Heidi, I actually wanted to ask you, I'm sure UNHCR has some numbers around this about the actual impact of Made 51 in terms of perhaps revenue or reach of the number of refugees that Made 51 has impacted. Could you shed some light on that?
Sure. From 2020, I think across the Made 51 social enterprises, we're working with over 3,000 artisans, of which 95% were women. So that has just, I think 2020 was, of course, COVID year. So those numbers actually were lower because many of the social enterprises had, orders that were canceled and had a limited ability to interact with the artisans. And, it wasn't possible to scale in some locations. So we're looking forward to the data for 2021, and hopefully we'll see an improvement there. We did have a quite large order that added to that, which was from Chloe, a French luxury brand. And this was our first partnership with with a luxury brand. And Chloe came to Made 51 because they were interested in fair trade and they wanted to look at how to support refugees. And in the end, we did lots of sampling across different social enterprises. And for their first product collaboration, they chose to work with Afghan women that were in Pakistan. And the social enterprise, Artisan Links, was the one who managed the order in collaboration with other local social enterprises who were just starting with Made 51 in Pakistan. And the potential that a retail partner has to help us to scale and to benefit more refugees is incredible. Artisan Links, before this order, was working with about 50 artisan women. So 50 Afghan women, and had been working with them, for decades, from the start of the conflict in Afghanistan. And well, not the start, but from about the middle of the conflict in Afghanistan. And they had, were getting consistent orders from their regular suppliers. And then through the partnership with Chloe, they went from working with 50 artisans to 707 artisans. And those artisans produced around 12,000 strips of embroidery, and each strip took between half a day to, I think, up to 10 days, some of the strips, depending on the design. And those strips were then incorporated into Chloe's iconic handbag collection. So that was a really great opportunity to just see the power that retailers and companies have in actually playing a role and in bringing around that livelihood solution for refugees. What's on the screen now is the second collaboration that was done with Chloe. which was in Rwanda. So this is a visor that the banana leaf weaving was done by Burundian and Congolese women who are living in a refugee camp in Rwanda. And then Chloe took the components and they were sent to their supplier in Italy, who finished off the components into a visor. And this was a smaller order, but I think there were about 70 women that were involved in this order. So I think that we can see, we really need retailers in the private sector to join with us. And here's the Chloe bag. You can see the strap was made by refugee women using this Tashumar embroidery skill. So, and seeing a product like that in such a beautiful light, where you're really showcasing the skill and that storytelling, Chloe was able to talk, a lot about the craftsmanship of that particular embroidery style, and how, through this partnership and this collaboration, they were able to help to reinvest in retaining that skill, which was in some ways being lost. So I think that's also a piece of it when we look at how we grow Made 51, just really recognizing that we need corporate partners and retailers to be a part of the solution. And of course, customers who end up buying those products as well.
And I wanted to add that I am so thankful for Made 51 to helping us get to that level, first of all. And second of all, to advocate for us social enterprises all over the world who are actually ready for those kind of big corporations, those kind of big collaborations. We are all export ready. We are all, we have extensive, knowledge and have been in business for many, many years. And this is through initiatives like Made 51, we can shed some light on the fact that social enterprises, that artisan women are able to work for a huge multinational brands and make beautiful products and contribute to the global economy, actually.
And I think just to add to that, Izabela, to reinforce that point, out of the 12,000 strips of embroidery, Chloe only rejected 28 strips. So the social enterprise had this huge process, Artisan Links, of training the women, of putting the production management systems in place, of checking the quality control, of packaging and exporting in the right way. And so that the ability to be able to have refugee artisans produce products and to get those products to such a high quality level is really, quite fantastic, and really about the importance of the role of the social enterprise.
Thank you. That's truly amazing impact. So we're coming towards the end, but I wanted to just quickly address one question that we had. A person, one of the viewers actually asked a question about whether artisans are being trained in entrepreneurial skills rather than just craft skills. Alejandra. Thank you, Alejandra, for asking the question. So I think I will try to just briefly answer this, and Heidi and Izabela, please chip in as well. I think with us at Earth Air, we've definitely trained the artisans, because a lot of what we do is, yes, we're training them on the craft, but we're also training them on pricing, on, how are wages calculated, what is a good quality product. We're training them on production systems, about timelines, about deadlines, about so in essence, quite a number of our own artisans have actually started making their own products on their own and selling them. So they sell them directly on Facebook, on Instagram. Some of them have started their own cooking businesses. So I think the training and the exposure that Made 51 and the engagement of the social enterprises with the artisans has enabled them to, have this entrepreneurial spirit that, hey, I can actually make something on my own because I've learned all these skills. And that's the whole idea behind Made 51, is that when the refugee artisan, for example, if they're resettled, they will be able to use those skills that they've learned to potentially start their own business and make products on their own. So we've actually come to 8 o'clock, to the end. It's 8 o'clock in Malaysia. We've come to the end of our session, but I think we will probably just end with a video. We'll go slightly over, but it's a video that was made by Earth Air with UNHCR support, which sort of illustrates, how refugee women have been working with Made 51 and with Earth Air. Could we have the video shown?
مثلا در افغانستان ما کار دست دوخته بودیم، کار دست میتونستیم، دستوزی همه کارا رو یاد داشتیم، اما در اینجا فهمیدیم که یعنی ما میتونیم که یک چیز نوه تجربه از این گرفتیم که مثلا ما تونستیم که یک چیز خوب آماده کنیم.
Nidang hele pen kalau ngomong pan amo mengevet lawe ma mengevet lawe jangan
Saya mà tổng chuyện lần mà hi bờ na tổng toàn in mà ngay chuẩn khang ngày lâu chiều thì thế thì đàn đi bò những bên in rồi ngay chuẩn lâu bữa nó khuy sẽ hàng hiền em mà buồn thì đàn dùng bút những bệ thì đàn tao ấy rằng ông bò sạch trắng ấy nó bị nào thằng bị tắc hàng mà như thế là đặc biệt.
तो निशी के भेजी दे बिशी कुशी लागे बिशी गन लागे क्या बाना भेजी तो आ रहा यो हासफाई thì ai nãy ở đây sao mà tôi kêu mà gì anh giờ đi về chỉ có tôi số cái đấy, họ sẽ làm bút thì cái gì vậy đi về chỉ tôi biết chút chút đấy. Em mà ngã amu ngày lâu mi tam pi tak ôm mi nghe, amu chill mi tam pi tak ôm mi nghe mà. Đi xem bao sama nghe là chuyện đàn điện rất là lâu rồi mà, đây hàng là sẽ biến lắm sao nghe lại mất rồi, ở đâu ông lại xem mình tôi chẳngน่าเสพล้อสมเก่งอะเราเว้ยไอ้จังอะล็อกดาวน์นี่เป็นสมในแรงไปขัดตัวดานังไปหนอไม่น่ะอีนี่หนังอ่ะน่าเสพกิซ้ำอาระเซนละดิบละอีตาระเซนละดิบละอาระบานาเวจุมอาระอีตาระอาระเซนละอาระดิบเซนมอดดิบมอดบานาเวจุมาระ
بسیار احساس خوش داد بچه که مثلا ما بتونیم یک کار بکنیم که تمام جهان ببینه که
تو بیشی کوچ لگه نه آره نه لارد دیتو آره ده هی برابر